Okay, hello everyone. As you already know, Kwanzaa is a celebration held largely in the African American community, celebrated, actually created by Dr. Maulana Karenga in 1966. Um, and he is the founder of Kwanzaa, and it's also founded on the principles of Kawaida theory. Um, Kwanzaa is celebrated throughout the African diaspora, and it's celebrated over 7 days, starting on December 26th with Umoja and ending on January 1st with Imani. Kwanzaa is not a religious holiday or holy day. It is a cultural celebration founded on the concept of the harvest, or an ingathering of the members of the community to reflect on the previous year or the past year, as well as the future year. So today, we're here to talk about the celebration of Kwanzaa in the LGBT community. And I have with me Imani Rashid and Cassandra Grant, who are both the co-chairs of the LGBT Kwanzaa community of NYC. So welcome Imani and Cassandra to Out FM.
Thank you.
Yes. So let's start our discussion. Let's begin with you, Cassandra. As I understand it, Kwanzaa celebration in the LGBT community was an outgrowth of Salsa Soul organization, of which you are a founding member. So let's talk a little bit about Salsa Soul, when it was founded and why.
Well, Salsa Soul came out of what we consider and we talk about now as a social justice movement. Back in the late 60s, early 70s, the person that actually came up with the vision and the concept was Reverend D. Jackson. And that was around in 1974, I think. And in 1976, we became incorporated. And it was an organization that really was founded based on the need for women of color, African Americans, Latinos, indigenous women, Asian women, who really wanted an alternative to the bars and who were really concerned about the issues of our lives, the issues around police brutality, education, healthcare, housing, you name it, we were engaged in those issues. And that was something that we all came together around, and certainly our sexuality. I mean, we were discovering who we were and becoming very proud of it. It wasn't something that we initially, in the late 60s, the early 70s, was really, really out there about, because we were just really beginning to find out who we were. But we were willing to stand for that, and we became a part of that movement. And out of that, we certainly incorporated Kwanzaa in our organization.
Wow, yeah, that's important, because to say particularly that it was part of a larger movement within the city, but with a certain identity of the Black women and the Black folks who are trying to establish that.
And I also say that we formed that organization because we were not necessarily welcome in the organizations that existed in the gay communities. So those organizations that were, led by Caucasian women and men, we didn't feel welcome. We didn't feel that they were addressing our needs. So in order for our needs to be met, we had to find our own organization. So we developed that organization based on our needs.
That's important to say. I'm glad that you made that point, Cassandra. That struggle was always there, and you were self-identified. Imani, you were instrumental in bringing Kwanzaa to Salsa Soul in those early days.
Yes.
Yeah, so tell us a little bit about that, how it was received, where you learned about Kwanzaa, some of those concepts.
Right. Okay. Habari Gani, everyone. That means what's happening, what's going on. Well, we are in the Kwanzaa, we're approaching the Kwanzaa season now. And so I am so mindful of how the year was about 1976, 77. I just finished school there at NYU. And I was familiar with the village, and I had heard a lot about these women who met at the church, and that they were a group of what we say queer women now, and they were Black lesbians. So I was so excited about going, and I finally got to go to my first meeting. So I was sitting there, and a sister by the name of Maua Flowers was there, and Janae, and there was a couple of other elders, along with people about my age or a little bit younger. Mm-hmm. And I heard them talking about sending Christmas cards to their ex-lovers. And I was like, wait a minute, did I struggle all this time to get here, and they're talking about Christmas cards? Because I had come out of a situation. My background was that I was helping a partner raise her son, and he was attending Yeruhu Sasa, which was called the East. Mm-hmm. And that was a progressive school where all of their subjects and everything was about culture, was about African peoples, Black peoples, and so on. And so Yusef Imani Ibaye now, but when he was living, he was very powerful. He had several wives and many children. And he had even helped me by getting some of my students then, because I was a teacher as well, an elementary school teacher. And so my kids got to play drums with them and walk in the African Liberation Day parade and everything. So now was my time. I'm at the meeting of Salsa Soul. So I raise my hand and I say, well, I hear you talking about Christmas, but how many of you celebrate Kwanzaa? And would you like to do Kwanzaa here? Mm-hmm. And I remember that Sister Janae. She said, sit down. Nobody wants to talk about no Kwanzaa. So now back to whether or not we're going to send Christmas cards to our exes or not. What do you think? And that's when Maua said, look, if the sister wants to have Kwanzaa, let her start it here. And I was like, oh, that's so wonderful. Who is that woman? I gotta meet her and hang out with her because I like her already. Mm-hmm. And then afterwards, I met Cassandra and some of the others, and I said, Cassandra, I heard Cassandra say, I do Kwanzaa in my classroom. I said, you do? And I do too. And so we decided to get together and talk about it so we could do it. And the first Kwanzaa happened there at Salsa because several of the women had children. And so that was the perfect.
That's important. Thank you. Wow, that's amazing. So you and Cassandra were already doing Kwanzaa in your classrooms. We're proud of you, sisters. We're proud of you. Cassandra, tell us about the early Kwanzaa celebrations, the different locations, and Imani just mentioned the children. So children seem to have always been part of your celebration. Vendors.
I think thank you for the question. I think any new concept, any new movement takes time. Mm-hmm. And it took a while for it to become a part of the infrastructure of the Salsa Soul organization. And certainly Imani, along with myself and maybe several other women, but there was always a very deep respect for African culture within the Salsa movement. There was always a deep respect for culture. Mm-hmm. Because we had our first women drummers, first women dancers, African dancers, women drummers, women going into non-traditional fields. So Salsa really opened the doors for so much. And the beginning of Kwanzaa was something that was embraced by the sisters in Kwanzaa. And we started celebrating it 7 days, there's 7 principles, and 7 days a week. So we would have the Kwanzaa at our organization, but then we started having Kwanzaa in the homes of our sisters. And what I'd like to say is that we not only brought Kwanzaa to the sisters and their families, but we brought it to the family children. And because Imani was an educator and I was an educator, we knew how to bring different levels of Kwanzaa in terms of the teaching and the understanding of Kwanzaa, so that it wasn't just an intellectual conversation, but it was something that would engage the audience in how to do it. What can I do? What can I do in my house to have Kwanzaa? Because most people hadn't heard it at all, and they thought if they had to do Kwanzaa, they couldn't do Christmas.
Right.
And we said, oh, you could do Christmas and you can do Kwanzaa, but let's look at the concept of Kwanzaa and what does it incorporate and how is it going to change the way that we're looking at the lives of our children and our families and ourselves.
Yes, and I think one of the most wonderful things, well, first of all, the first Kwanzaa was held right there at the church. And we saw how the more mothers brought their children out for that particular Kwanzaa. And yes, well, that was at my house. That was later on at my house in the 80s. But that, not having had children myself, I just think, and I'm so grateful for the fact that Kwanzaa allowed me to be able to experience what that nurturing, what that mothering, what that parenting is all about. And I can say that it fulfilled my need to have that in my life. But I can remember that I was going to say that Kwanzaa and the homes was so wonderful because Harriet at the time had that truck, that big, what do you call, van. And Foster Lady also had a van, but with Harriet's van, she would get Candace and Harriet would take the fruits that we used the first night that we would have it at the church. And if you volunteered to have Kwanzaa in your home, you didn't have to worry about supplying the fruits, because here came the van with Harriet and Candace taking it out and bringing it, and Cassandra would set up the tables, the Kwanzaa table in everyone's home. But the thing that still sustains me is those conversations that we had. People were in their 20s and 30s. I'm 80 now, but I was 30 something. And to talk about the principles, what did emoji mean? What did emoji mean in your life this past year? And to actually sit there and talk about and get into it. Because I think that these principles were developed, but unless you actually get into them, they're just that, just principles on a paper.
Interesting.
And we used it as a way of life. We used it as a way of being. And I think that we're still carrying that concept on, but we were also teaching it to our children so that those principles, the principles of creativity. So we would show them what it is to be creative. And what does it mean to, have cooperative economics? And over the years, we began to expand on those principles of unity, of cooperation, of cooperative economics, of creativity, of
self-determination,
of faith, and self-determination. And self-determination for all of us meant a lot of things, because we were going through a lot of changes, and certainly being in our 20s and our 30s. And then we had the elders. And one thing that I can say about Salsa, it was always an intergenerational organization. We always had the elders you know, like Maua and Lavinia and Audrey and Georgia Brooks, Audrey Lords and Georgia Brooks, and we had the poets, Cheryl Clark. I mean, and we had the young ones that were just coming up and beginning to develop organizations, and starting the drumming group, and starting the dance groups. And so much came out of, you know, our Kwanzaa celebrations would be a celebration of great creativity, great art, great music. We would
Great.
have a program that would last 7 days. Can you imagine 7 days of women coming together and sharing food, dance, music, children performing, adults performing, poetry.
Okay.
We
Yes.
created
That's right.
our community around what does we made Kwanzaa for ourselves.
Yes,
We didn't-
Cassandra. That's beautiful.
We created our own community around Kwanzaa. What does Kwanzaa mean to us?
That's right. And we can
That's
take,
important. Hold on a second, Imani. I just want to say,
Okay.
we only have like about 2 minutes left. So I need you to talk about this year's 43rd annual Kwanzaa celebration, community celebration. So Imani, just give us an idea of what the program's going to be this year.
yes, well, unity, umoja means unity, to strive for and maintain unity in the family, community, nation, and race. And that, of course, this is the first night of Kwanzaa. So the first night of Kwanzaa is the one that we chose, and that's the principle. And we have a very exciting program. So
We have about a minute, Imani.
okay, so we have gone on and invited Dr. Kofi Adoma, who we have had relationship before, but only by Skype, where we would enjoy one another Kwanzaa. She's going to be the host this year.
And she's from?
And she's from Detroit. And with her comes a whole group of people who have also been practicing Kwanzaa. And so it'll be interesting to have the two groups together this year and experience some of the way that she will light the candles and the way that Dr. Kofi will light the candles and what comments that she'll have to say. And Dupre will be singing with and leading everyone and lift every voice and sing the Black National Anthem. We have so much. I just say it in 1 minute. Just
give us a
we
couple
have
of
several individuals that will be from various organizations
yes.
that will be really doing the principles, you know, through either their, you know, art or
yes.
some form of art. We'll have, you know, some do presenters that will do the principles, and then we'll have some artists that will either sing or dance or perform.
Okay. So Dr. Perry is probably our biggest fan. And so the elder Dr. Perry will be speaking about Umoja. And then we have, when we come into Kuji Chagalia, the second principle, which means self-determination. The Black trans media, who have always been the enthusiasts of Kwanzaa and supporters of us, and Sasha Alexander and her wife Olympia will be taking that lead. And we have a harpist this year, Anya Simone, and will be a harpist who is also of the trans community. Then the next principle is Ojima, which means collective work and responsibility. And we have Mary Ann Adams, who is of the what's the organization?
Dami Nobler. She's a founder.
Yes, Dami Nobler. Yeah, she will be speaking on Ujima and certainly knows a lot about that principle. And we have pre-recording of the Kwanzaa kids, many of whom have since grown up and involved in other things now, but I know they always take with them what they've learned from the Kwanzaa. And Ujamaa, the fourth principle of Kwanzaa, which means collective economics, so important this year. Unfortunately, in the interest of time, which we're running out of time for this segment, let me give a few details about the program.
So as Cassandra, you said, we have wonderful presenters of the 7 principles of Kwanzaa, or the Nguzo Saba, from various organizations. And those people, those folks would be Wilhelmina Perry from LGBT Faith Leaders of African Descent, Sasha Alexander and Olympia Sudan from Black Trans Media, Mary Ann Adams from Zami Nobla of Atlanta, Selena Mullen of Alush, Javon Martin from Princess Janae's Place, and also Oyolade Roberta Stokes and Steve Latour, also presenting the principles of Kwanzaa. In addition, there will be performers, as you said, also Cassandra, vocalists and dancers and drummers, such as Jacques Dupre, who will lead us in the Black National Anthem, Lift Every Voice and Sing. We'll have a presentation by poet Pamela Sneed. Also a harpist, Diana Simone, and Lupe Family will be giving a presentation as well, honoring Dr. Joyce Duncan. And this is just among many of the invited guests that will be there for the event. People can register or get tickets by going to Eventbrite and searching the 43rd Annual LGBT Kwanzaa Community Celebration. Let me repeat that, at Eventbrite, the 43rd Annual LGBT Kwanzaa Community Celebration. So go to the Eventbrite to register and to get tickets. So tickets are there for a suggested donation. And for further information, you can actually go to our the website or the Facebook page, which is LGBT Kwanzaa Community of NYC. So to say asante sana to you for all the work that you do. This has been Stah.